Hey everyone, welcome back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and as always, we are here to explore the stories that inspire, challenge, and empower us to lead fuller and more authentic lives. Today, we are diving into a topic that deserves way more airtime, the intersection of mental health, disability, and the personal identity. And to help us unpack it all, I'm thrilled to welcome an incredible guest, Emily Goodson. So, welcome to the show, Emily.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Lovely, lovely. So, Emily, before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all of the listeners. Dear listeners, Emily is a powerhouse advocate for reshaping how we think about disability, intimacy, and workplace inclusion. Her journey is remarkable, and at just 8 years old, she experienced a brain injury that changed her life. But instead of letting those challenges define her, she transformed them into opportunities to educate and empower others. And from her creative work featured in the LA Times to her upcoming book, Dating Disability, Emily brings a fresh and fearless perspective to conversations that about self-discovery and the shame and how to dismantle both. That's amazing, right? So buckle up because this is going to be a heartfelt and eye-opening episode for all of you. So welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction. I could not have said it better myself.
Thank you so much. And so, Emily, first of all, definitely, I need to thank you so much for being here today. And today we'll be discussing about a topic which is very, very important. I also believe so. So, I want to start asking you. I mean, how did your experience of acquiring a disability at such a young age shape your understanding of mental health?
Oh my goodness. When I had my brain injury, it was in the 1990s, and mental health was a non-existent topic at that point, at least where I grew up in the States. And that was really to my detriment. And in recent years, as I've become an adult and educated myself, right, I just think in general, I do think that the currents are shifting, but in general, we don't talk about mental health enough. And I think, particularly for people with disabilities, the statistics show that people with disabilities have higher rates of mental health challenges. And certainly that's compounded when you add in other pieces of identity as well. But I think this, my experience with my brain injury was very physical, right? It impacted me very physically in the sense that I became paralyzed on one side of my body. And that was almost so much to grasp that, I was a child, but, my family, my doctors, nobody brought mental health into the conversation, I think because, what happened physically was so overwhelming. But, in looking back, if this happened to a child I know today, mental health would be one of the first things I brought up.
Frankly, I totally understand. And from here, one more thing is um, I have to say this that do you feel like society's messaging around disability amplified any struggles with the shame or maybe self-worth during that time?
100%. That, no question asked. And that's what my book that's in the publishing process, Dating Disability, and that's what an article I published in the LA Times almost 3 years ago is about, is that society, and I live in the United States, I live in New York, and can mostly speak to culture here in the States, but I think particularly here in the States, disability is something that we often forget about when we speak about diversity or inclusion. And in addition to that, we have a lack of representation of people with disabilities in the boardroom, certainly in Hollywood, and growing up, when I came home after my brain injury, it was like, oh, we don't want Emily to think of herself as different. That was sort of my family's opinion and my community's opinion. And it's like, okay, well, this is silly because I walk, if you were to meet me in person, you would see that I walk with a very apparent limp because the muscles on the left side of my body are so weak. I type with one hand because this hand, I'm lifting up my left hand for those of us, who aren't watching over video. My left hand is curled up, like the fingers can't open because they're so weak. So, obviously there's something very physically different about me, but I think society's historical opinion has been to hide away disability, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, whatever the difference is. And I think, for me personally, society's opinion of disability really contributed to the shame I developed.
Thanks for sharing this. I was kind of hesitating about asking this, but I believe this is much important. People should know about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. And I think so many of us, disabled or not, can relate to the idea of unlearning this societal scripts. So it's definitely empowering to hear how you reframe those narratives for yourself. And what would you say to someone who's maybe just starting that journey or into this phase only of self-discovery? So what do you say?
Be patient with yourself is what I would say. Because, whatever it is, whatever societal narrative you're rewriting, whether that's, I've rewritten a couple of them. So one of them is certainly rewriting the script on disability. And, disability is immensely valuable to me. I love having my disability. I love the perspective it's given me. And that was something I had to rewrite. Another one is certainly the idea of being single. And not married and what that means and never having a boyfriend. That was another big one that I had to rewrite. And I think what I would say to people is be patient because these scripts, whatever they are, I could also talk about money and being a woman and how to handle money. Like all of these things are really ingrained in us from the time that we're born. They were ingrained in our parents. They were ingrained in our grandparents. And it takes time to dismantle these things. It doesn't happen overnight. And as much as I wish it would, and Avik, one of the things that I've been kind of reflecting on recently is, I think this is a good metaphor, is, I live in New York City, and, all of our buildings are very close together. And the building next door to mine is currently being demolished to build a new apartment building. And this building's been there, probably 80, 90 years. And I was like, how is this gonna work? Because it's not like they can just blow it up. It's like, how is this gonna come down? And it's been a fascinating process to watch because it started 6 months ago. They first took out kind of the furniture and the things inside the building. Then they took, then they took off, I think, the roof. Then they took out, they're literally now going brick by brick and pulling each brick and door frame out of the building to safely demolish it without causing harm to other people. And I love that metaphor. I've been reflecting on it because I'm like, that's the same thing that I've had to do internally and that a lot of us have had to do is like, these beliefs of unworthiness or ugliness or, you know, just not feeling valued, like these things are so stuck in us. Like sometimes we have to like really like go thought by thought and trigger by trigger, and just it takes time.
Very true. Yeah, definitely. And also here, one thing that I love about your story is how you have embraced the intersectionality of identity, like the disability, intimacy, and the mental health. So, if you can share any moment when you realize that these aspects of yourselves couldn't be kind of compartmentalized. So, yeah.
Um, I can. I can, and I think two come to mind that I'll highlight is, one is I have a very good friend who I wanted to be more than friends and date him, and he did not at the time, and it was one of those moments where we had the conversation and talked about I wanted to be more than friends, he didn't, and we tried to be friends after that, and it went on for probably 3 months, and then it hit a point where I realized I was like, I want to be friends with him because I love him as a person, but it's hurting me too much inside. Like it was ripping up my insides to try and be friends with him because I wanted more, right? And I had a very honest conversation with him, and honestly, those are the words we both used, is like, I'm just not able to compartmentalize this inside myself. And we still talk occasionally, and I still love him very, very much as a person, and I'm so grateful for him. But it was just one of those moments where I was like, I can't keep seeing you and keep texting you and talking to you, like, because that's ignoring my feelings of how I feel and what I want this relationship to be. So that's one. And then I think two, I worked in corporate HR for about 10 years. I built HR departments in tech startups and did recruiting. And I loved doing that. I love HR, I love recruiting. But there came a point in 2019 where I just felt like I wasn't living up to my full potential. And I wasn't reaching as many people as I could. And so I decided to go out on my own and be a consultant. And, then honestly, it's about a year later, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I had a meeting that I was on over Zoom, and I was doing HR advising, and my client asked me, they said, well, Emily, how do we recruit more diverse talent? And it became apparent to me at that moment, I was like, they're defining diversity solely upon what they can see on a Zoom screen. Because here they are asking me that question, and they had no idea that I actually am diverse because I have a disability. And at that moment, I had this kind of gut feeling inside of me of, I can no longer sit here and not tell my story about disability, because I'm in a place where I can do that, and I can speak for so many people who feel shame about that and feel like they can't speak up for themselves. So I've had those moments both personally and professionally where it's like all of a sudden you realize I'm not being true to myself if I don't go this way with my actions.
Understood. I can feel that because I don't know, coincidentally the same thing somehow it matches with me as well, because so I also been like 10 to 11 years into HR, corporate HR, into all of it there, and then I moved later to product design and thing. I shifted. So somewhere I also felt this kind of scenarios, and 2019 was that period of change for me.
Yep.
So I always take COVID-19 as a good part for my life.
Yeah.
Not in that sense, like people say, oh, that's COVID-19 is not helpful for people, not helpful in terms of health or in terms of career, everything. But I take it as a positive way because that was the phase where it helped me transform myself and uh, 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 into a different stream. So somewhere I was carrying all these experiences from the corporate HR, how things goes on in a management system, and then moving to another system where there is a creativity and all these things. So I always take it as a positive way, but yes, whatever happens for the best. So that's the good thing I always believe. So I can understand what you have mentioned. It's totally correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the pandemic really caused a lot of people to evaluate their decisions and their choices. I mean, it certainly did for me. Yeah.
Exactly. I totally agree. Yeah, great. So, in your creative work and writing,
Yes.
you focus a lot on dating and the intimacy, or as a person with your with a disability. So, how has exploring those topics helped you process that shame and move towards the authenticity?
You know, it's a great question, and I've heard other people say this. This is not just an Emily opinion, but I write to understand myself better, and I think, you know, I had a mentor tell me once that a lot of the writing I do is gonna be for me, like it's not gonna be for the general population. And you know, I'm a big fan of journaling. I journal quite a bit, and that's sort of how I, you know, picked writing back up, is because picked publishing for an audience back up, is because I got so much into my journaling. And yes, I think 100%. You know, writing about my experiences with intimacy and with dating, it's helped me to process them and to really see things from a new perspective. And I can give you an example. I was, this isn't intimacy related, but it is well, yes it is. Let me take that back. So I was working this morning actually on my book, which is called Dating Disability. It comes out later this year. And the first part of the book is, back to your first question, you know, sort of stories of how shame manifested in my life and the things that happened to me that contributed to shame. And one of the stories I was talking about is when I was in middle school, I really wanted to go to Mexico because I was taking Spanish, and I love Spanish, wanted to go on this class trip with my friends. And my mom told me I couldn't go because she was afraid I would get stuck on a pyramid. We were going to go to Teotihuacan, where there are these tall pyramids that the Mayans and Aztecs built, and she was afraid I would climb up and not be able to get back down.
Okay.
And God love her, not the most logical explanation, but that's what it was. And anyway, my point is, every time I've told that story before, it's been from, I've felt a lot of anger over it, and I felt it because I know how much that then limited me growing up when I'm told I can't do things. But when I was writing it this morning, I was writing that story in the book manuscript, and I thought, you know what, like, I really honestly have a lot more compassion for my mother, and maybe that's my age now, but I get it. Like, I get, your child, you just watch them almost die because it's something you couldn't control. And that's your reaction, is to be protective. And it was also my reaction. So, when I talk about my lack of dating in my 20s and 30s, it's because I was protecting myself from getting rejected. Like, I just didn't want that to happen because I had so much pain I was already processing. So it really, the writing is really helpful too, because it helps me to see other perspectives, right, that I haven't always seen before.
That's really lovely, yeah.
Yeah.
And what's one myth about dating and the disability that you wish more people understood? And also, like, how do you address it in your book, Dating Disability?
So the one myth I would want to address is that people with disabilities are sexual. They have sexual needs and wants and desires just like everybody else. And I think, that's something I predominantly hear over and over again in response to my work is like, people, if there's a wonderful documentary, if people haven't seen it, called Crip Camp, which is on Netflix. And it interviews people from the 70s and 80s here in the States. And one of the women with cerebral palsy, she, who is still living, I believe, she, makes a comment that she went to a doctor and the physician couldn't believe she had an STD, a sexually transmitted disease. And so I think this myth just compounds over and over and over again that disabled people aren't sexual. Not true. And I think in the book I try and address that by and I try and address it too in my personal life, of just being very clear with people of like when I am interested in them sexually or romantically. And I do think sometimes it takes, people, I'm not doing this on the first meeting, but like, I think sometimes it does take people back, because they don't necessarily expect that to come out of me.
Understood. Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, and then also you have mentioned about undergoing a self-discovery in Jan 2020. In your journey in 2020.
Yeah. Yep.
So, what were some of the tools or practices that helped you overcome the shame related to disability and sexuality?
Yeah, I would say 3 big ones. So number 1, journaling, which we've talked about a little bit. I'm a big journaler. I have a set of questions I ask myself every day in a Google Doc, and I just bullet out the answers. It's there are things like, what's the best thing that could happen today? What do I know? What am I learning? What am I amplifying? What am I prioritizing? So I bullet out answers to those every day. Journaling's number 1, helped me in my self-discovery. Number 2 is coaching. Like, I've worked with a professional coach, different ones, but I've worked with different professional coaches one-on-one for probably the last 12 years. If not weekly, at least once a month, and having that sounding board and that person to challenge me has been super helpful. And then number 3, meditation. I meditate every single day. It was something I studied quite a bit during the pandemic. And meditation has just completely changed my life. Like, being able to just reset mentally and to have those kind of quiet moments where you're focused on something other than that like rampant thought pattern.
Understood. Yeah. And also, like, how do you continue to practice those tools today? During the moments of self-doubt or external judgment.
Yeah, sure. So I meditate and journal every day. I journal in the mornings. I meditate, honestly, usually midday. When I have lunch, I take a moment and I meditate. And then coaching, that's built into my calendar 100% of the time. I think the other thing I would add that I try and practice now is when I find myself spiraling or starting to go on a negative thought pattern, whatever that might be, my self-talk in my head is I literally say to myself, stop. Like, I literally in my head say, stop. If we're going down a pattern of, oh, this podcast interview is going to go really bad, and what if I say the wrong thing? And I just say to myself, stop. Like, we're going to pick another thought. And so I think it's, having those practices, but also being aware, like, you're never going to completely vanquish the negative thoughts or the shame or the feelings of unworthiness or whatever it might be. And so having those in the moment tools, like, whatever it is, to just stop your thought pattern and get you on something more positive.
Got it. Yeah. And as someone who has lived through the highs and lows of these experiences, what message would you leave for our listeners who may be struggling with the shame, or whether it's tied to their identity, disability, or anything else?
I would leave you with our differences are what make us beautiful and what make us valuable. And yeah, mic drop. Our differences are what make us beautiful and valuable.
Oh, lovely. And one more thing, like,
Okay.
If they are feeling overwhelmed by that shame, then what's the very first step they should take to start letting it go?
Talk to somebody. Whoever it is, I think one of the things I talk about in my book that psychiatrists have talked about quite a bit is shame likes to hide and it likes to be covered up. It likes secrecy. And so the best way to combat it is to have a witness. And that could be your journal, that could be a friend, that could be a coach. For me, it was a coach is really where I started. Just start with one person, trying to verbalize to them what you feel ashamed of. And from there, it's going to get a lot easier for you to talk about it and for you to overcome that. But I think that, don't not tell your story. If something you feel ashamed of has happened, don't hide it and don't cover it up. You don't have to go explaining it to the world in the LA Times like I did, but find somebody you trust and start to chip away at that shame.
So, Emily, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your vulnerability, and your strength with us today. And your story is definitely a testament to the power of resilience and authenticity. And I know that it's going to resonate with so many of our listeners today. And for everyone who is listening right now, or maybe you will be listening, I hope that you feel as inspired as I do right now. And if you love this conversation, be sure to check out Emily's upcoming book, Dating Disability, and explore her incredible advocacy work. And also, do not forget to hit subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and join the conversation online. And let's keep breaking those barriers, challenging stigmas, and building healthier and more inclusive lives all together. So until next time, take care of your mind, take care of your life, and as always, stay curious. So this is your host Ravik signing off. Thank you so much.
Love it.